For over a century, we've been told that Victorian gentlemen travelled to Italy for the art, the culture, and the refinement of their classical education. We've imagined them standing before Michelangelo's David, with scholarly notebooks, sketching architectural details, and writing earnest letters home about the improving nature of Renaissance frescoes. We've pictured them as buttoned-up, sexless aesthetes who cared only about marble statues and moral improvement. We might be missing something rather significant. Tonight, you are Lord Alfred Douglas, and it's 1894. You've just told your mother you're going to Venice to study Tintoretto's use of light. What you haven't told her is that you've already received 3 coded telegrams from friends about a certain palazzo where the owner asks no questions. The wine flows freely, and the local gondoliers are remarkably understanding about midnight visits between bachelor apartments. You're 24 years old, you've got your father's money and none of his supervision, and you're about to join what might be history's most elaborate system for avoiding Victorian sexual propriety. You're not just taking the Grand Tour, you're taking the Gay Grand Tour, and there's an entire underground railroad of fellow travellers who've already mapped out exactly where you need to go. The evidence for this parallel Grand Tour isn't just speculation or wishful thinking. In 2018, renovations at the Palazzo Mocenigo in Venice uncovered a hidden cache of documents, photographs, and personal effects that had been walled up since 1895. Among them were hotel registers with fascinating patterns of single male guests, coded guidebooks with symbols that definitely weren't marking good restaurants, and photographs, oh the photographs, of English gentlemen with Italian models in poses that would make even modern Instagram influencers blush. One particularly memorable image shows a portly British banker reclining as Bacchus, while a very athletic Venetian youth feeds him grapes. The banker's expression suggests he thinks he's being subtle. The photograph suggests otherwise. This discovery, made in what locals had long called the Bachelor Hotel, reveals something extraordinary about Victorian society's greatest open secret. As we settle in tonight, we're going to uncover not just what archaeologists found behind those Venetian walls, but what it tells us about the surprisingly relatable lives of men who turned studying abroad into an art form all its own. But before we begin this journey together, write in the comments where you are listening from. It's fascinating to learn where in the world you are. Also, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Now, dim the lights and prepare to discover why this story will change how you think about Victorian propriety, Italian hospitality, and the real reason so many English gentlemen became lifelong enthusiasts of Venetian architecture. Chapter 1. The Palazzo of Extremely Open Secrets. You arrive at the Palazzo Mocenigo on a humid September evening in 1894, your trunk heavy with the wrong clothes for Italian weather and the right letters of introduction for Italian society, or at least a very particular subset of it. The gondolier who brought you from the train station didn't ask for an address, you simply said the English Palazzo, and he nodded, knowingly the same way a modern taxi driver might nod when you name a notorious nightclub. The building itself looks respectable enough. From the outside, 3 stories of fading pink stucco, green shutters, and the required amount of Renaissance detail to satisfy any suspicious relatives who might inquire about your accommodations, but step through the water gate, and you immediately understand why your friend Charles called it the most dangerous. A dress in Venice for one's reputation, and the safest for one's true nature. The owner, Signor Benedetti, greets you in the entrance hall. He's a fascinating character, a former opera singer, whose career ended mysteriously in Rome, now running what he calls a pension. For artistic gentlemen, his guest register, the one that survived behind the wall, tells an extraordinary story. Between 1890 and 1895, over 300 English bachelors signed in, all between the ages of 20 and 40, all travelling alone, all staying for precisely 3 weeks, the maximum time one could claim was needed to thoroughly study Venetian art without raising suspicions. Back home, the code names in the register are delicious in their transparency. There's Mr. Achilles, who arrived with Mr. Patroclus, Mr. Hadrian, who requested a room overlooking Mr. Antonuse's quarters, and at least 15 different Mr. Smiths, who all somehow had the same handwriting. One particularly bold guest signed in as Oscar Fingal O'Flaherty. Wills Wilde, his real name, just 6 months before his trials would make such openness impossible. But it's the photographs that truly bring this world to life. That cache behind the wall contained over 200 images, and they're a masterclass in Victorian doublespeak. Every single one is labelled as an artistic. Study or classical tableau, there's you, or rather Lord Alfred Douglas, dressed as Ganymede, cupbearer to the gods, while an Italian youth dressed as Zeus looks at you with an expression that has absolutely nothing to do with classical mythology and everything to do with why you're both wearing significantly fewer clothes than the September weather would warrant the photographer. Giuseppe Primoli had a studio on the ground floor of the Palazzo. His business cards, also found in the cache, advertised discreet artistic, photography for discerning gentlemen. The discreet part apparently meant that he kept 2 sets of books. One for the tax inspectors showing portraits of visiting merchants, and another real one showing what actually paid for his champagne lifestyle. His prices were extraordinary, the equivalent of a working man's monthly wage for a single artistic session, yet he was booked solid with appointments sometimes scheduled at 2 in the morning for optimal lighting conditions. What makes Primoli's work fascinating isn't just the obvious homoeroticism, it's the elaborate effort to maintain plausible deniability. Every photograph has a classical or artistic justification. You're not embracing a naked Italian youth, you're recreating the death of Hyacinthus. You're not gazing longingly at your gondolier, you're depicting Mercury, and immortal. The props department must have been extraordinary. Laurel wreaths, lyres strategically placed urns, and enough draped fabric to stock a theatre company. The coded guidebook found with these materials takes this art of disguise even further. Written in English but published in Venice, it's titled A Gentleman's Guide to Venetian Architecture, except the architectural symbols in the margins aren't marking churches, and Palazzos A, small Greek lambda marks accommodating establishments. A triangle indicates sympathetic proprietors. A circle with a dot means exercise caution, and a double Venus symbol. 2 circles with crosses marks locations where architectural appreciation may be conducted after midnight. You have your own copy of this guide. Lord Alfred has additional handwritten notes. Next to the entry for the Café Florian, you've written Tuesday evenings northeast. Corner, ask for Giuseppe's special table. The Rialto Bridge entry includes 3rd pillar from the south after 10 p.m. Wear a red carnation. The city becomes a vast coded map. Every landmark, a potential meeting place. Every innocent tourist site, a cover story for something far more interesting. The most revealing document, though, is a letter from one guest to another, never sent, perhaps too dangerous even for the Italian postal system. My dear boy, it begins, Venice is everything London is not. Here one may walk arm in arm with beauty itself and call it appreciation of local customs. One may share a gondola built for one and call it economy. One may live, truly live, and call it art. I've been dead for 40 years in England. Here for 3 weeks I'm finally alive. Chapter 2. The Brotherhood of Perpetual Bachelors. By your 2nd week at the Palazzo Mocenigo, you've discovered something remarkable. You're not just visiting a tolerant city, you're joining an entire parallel society. The Victorian gay grand tour isn't just about individual freedom, it's about a carefully constructed network that stretches from London's clubs to Cairo's hotels, with Italy as its beating heart. The excavated documents reveal an extraordinary system. There's a leather-bound notebook, water-damaged but legible, that contains what can only be described a gay travel agency's client list names, addresses, interests, coded naturally, and most importantly, letters of introduction. Your name appears on page 47. Lord Add Poetry, Hellenistic Studies, Swimming References, OW. London R&R, Paris. Count the 5th Naples Preferences, Artistic Athletic, Discreet, Avoid Germans, Too Serious Americans, Too Loud, anyone from Birmingham knows. Farther, this network had its own economy. The Palazzo's financial records, hidden in a false bottom drawer and discovered only when the furniture was being restored, show a fascinating payment system. Room rates were negotiable based on reciprocal introductions. Bring a new member to the network, get a week free. Vouch for someone who causes scandal, pay double. There's even what appears to be an insurance fund contributions to support anyone who needed to leave England. Suddenly, due to domestic complications, the photographs from this period show the same faces appearing across different Italian cities. There's you at the Palazzo Mocenigo, then the same group at Lord Byron's former villa in Venice, then again at a villa in Capri. It's like looking at Victorian Instagram, if Instagram was sepia-toned, and everyone was pretending to be interested in classical statuary. Byron's villa deserved special attention. By 1894, it had been transformed into what one visitor called Athens on the Adriatic. The current tenant, an English expatriate named James Morrison, almost certainly not his real name, had created what can only be described as a gay commune with pretensions. The daily schedule, posted in the hallway and now in the Venice Archaeological Museum, is magnificent in its optimism. 8 a.m. athletic exercises in the garden, clothing optional. 10 a.m. breakfast and improving conversation. 12 p.m. artistic pursuits, life drawings, sculpture appreciation. 2 p.m. siesta. Rooms must remain unlocked for safety. 4 p.m. swimming and sun worship. 6 p.m. cocktails and Byronic poetry. 8 p.m. dinner. Toga dress encouraged. 10 p.m. evening entertainment. See Giuseppe for details. The evening entertainments were legendary. One elderly Venetian, interviewed in the 1960s, remembered his grandfather, who worked as a footman at the villa, describing parties where English gentlemen performed Greek dramas. Wearing very historically inaccurate costumes, they called it culture. The old man laughed, but it was the happiest culture you ever saw. The coded guidebooks. Evolved into an art form by 1894, there were at least 3 different versions circulating. The basic edition, Monuments of Venice, used architectural terms. As codes, a sturdy foundation meant a safe meeting place. Crumbling facade warned of police attention. Recent renovations indicated new management that might not be sympathetic. Magnificent rear entrance meant, well, some codes weren't that subtle. The advanced edition, the artistic. Gentleman's Companion to Italy, included entire itineraries. Your copy has a suggested 3-week tour days. 1 to 3, acclimatization in Venice. See Signor B at the Palazzo M. Days 4 to 7. Excursion to Padua University students, very welcoming. Days 8 to 14. Naples and Capri. Baron von G hosts Tuesday salons. Days 15 to 21. Return to Venice via Florence. Avoid the Pensione. Browning proprietor has English relatives, but the masterpiece was Classical Sites of Modern Italy, which provided complete cover stories. Each entry included not just where to go, but what to tell suspicious relatives. The entry for Capri reads, tell concerned parties you're studying the ruins of Villa Jovis Tiberius's palace. Provides excellent excuse for extended stay. Local guides very knowledgeable about ancient Roman customs, particularly after dark. Note, local wine stronger than expected. Blame any indiscretions on this. The social dynamics within this network were complex. The cache included calling cards with subtle signals. A card with the corner turned down meant receiving visitors. 2 corners meant very much receiving visitors. The entire card folded in. Half apparently meant husband arrived from England, unexpectedly stay away. There were rules unwritten but understood. Never use real names in telegrams. Always have an artistic project to discuss at dinner. Learn at least 5 facts about whatever monument you're supposedly studying. Keep a boring journal to show. Relatives, and an interesting one hidden in your luggage. And most importantly, what happens in Venice stays in Venice. Unless it happens in Capri, in which case it definitely stays in Capri, because even Venice had standards. The network protected its own. When young Lord Somerset faced scandal in London, network spirited him to Venice within 48 hours. When a Birmingham industrialist's son was arrested in Naples for public indecency, swimming naked at noon, the fool, the network's lawyers had him released and on a ship to Greece before his father could find out. The motto, never written but always understood, was, we take care of our own because no one else will. Chapter 3, the Venetian Finishing School. 3 weeks into your stay, you've learned that the Palazzo Mocenigo isn't just a refuge, it's an education. The Victorian Gay Grand Tour served as a kind of finishing school, teaching young men not just how to love, but how to survive loving the wrong gender in the right century. The daily routine at the Palazzo, documented in a guest diary found in the walled cache, was carefully structured. Mornings were for maintaining appearances. You'd write beautiful letters home about churches visited and paintings. Admired the Palazzo provided a library of art books for reference, margins filled with helpful notes. Mention this if asked about Tuesday, or good excuse for being out all night afternoons. Were for education of a different sort. The Palazzo Salon hosted what Signor Benedetti called conversation circles. The topics recorded in his appointment book were magnificently coded Greek wrestling techniques, the sculptural form. In motion, Venetian nocturnal architecture, and the particularly popular advanced Italian vocabulary for artistic appreciation. These weren't just euphemisms. The network understood that knowledge was protection you learned, which Italian phrases would get you out of trouble with police. I'm studying for my doctorate. In classical literature, you learned which gestures meant interested, not interested, and my roommate is a government informant. You learned the crucial difference between Venetian law, relatively relaxed, and papal law, relatively fatal. The photographs from this period show the education in progress. There's a series of wrestling instruction images that would make any modern personal trainer proud or blush. The models, invariably young Venetian men of remarkable flexibility, demonstrate holds with names like the Athenian grip and the Spartan submission. Your own presence in several of these photos, Lord Alfred, suggests you were a dedicated student of classical athletics, but the real education happened in the evening tutorials. Giuseppe Premoli, the photographer, also served as what he called a cultural liaison. His job was to introduce English visitors to appropriate local companions for linguistic practice. His ledger, discovered behind a false panel, lists these companions with businesslike efficiency. Marco, gondolier, speaks some English, very discreet, allergic to shellfish. Antonio, art student, genuinely knows about art, tendency to fall in love. Paolo, former seminary student, excellent Latin, avoid religious discussions. The process was remarkably organized. New arrivals would have an orientation with Giuseppe, who would assess their interests, experience level, and, more importantly, their ability to be discreet. Based on this, they'd be matched with appropriate companions. The inexperienced got gentle teachers, the reckless got stern minders, the generous got whatever. They wanted your own orientation notes survive, written in Giuseppe's careful hand. Lord Ad, previous experience evident, good Italian, terrible at discretion when drinking. A sign, Marco patient, or Giovanni doesn't speak English, can't repeat stories. The financial arrangements were surprisingly modern rather than crude transactions. There was a system of patronage. English visitors would sponsor Italian youth's education, art supplies, or family businesses. The fiction was maintained even in private. Your accounts show payments to Mancini for language instruction and Gembolini for artistic modelling. The fact that neither gentleman appears to have existed is beside the point. The Palazzo also served as a safe space for experimentation with identity. A trunk discovered in the attic contained what can only be described as a Victorian drag wardrobe. Photographs show English gentlemen dressed as Venetian ladies for carnival practice, though carnival was months away. There's you, Lord Alfred, in a magnificent green silk gown, fan held coquettishly, looking far more comfortable than any Victorian. Gentlemen should in a corset. These dress-up sessions weren't just play, they were practice for the masked balls that provided perfect cover for public affection. At carnival, anyone could kiss anyone. Men could dress as women, women as men, and for a few precious nights, Venice's usual tolerance became official policy. The network made sure to schedule visits during these periods. The Palazzos booking records show triple rates for Carnival Week and a waiting list. 2. Years long, the education extended to practical matters of the heart. There's a fascinating document, Rules for Romantic Correspondence, found in the cache. It advises, never write love when admiration will suffice. Never write admiration when regard is safer. Never write regard when silence is wisest. But if you must write love, learn Italian first. It sounds less criminal in translation. The veterans taught the newcomers survival skills, how to recognize a police informant, too many questions about specific names, how to handle blackmail attempts, never pay, always counter-threaten with social embarrassment. How to explain extended absences to family, develop a chronic condition requiring Mediterranean air, how to choose trustworthy servants. Venetians, yes. Romans, maybe Neapolitans. Never. There was even a peculiar form of sex education, a medical text. The Gentleman's Guide to Hygiene in Southern Climates is clearly about more than avoiding malaria. Chapters on preventing inflammation, appropriate use of olive oil, and the importance of regular examination between companions leave little to imagination while maintaining perfect medical propriety. Chapter 4. The Capri Conspiracy. By November 1894, you've graduated from Venice's relatively safe embrace to the wild shores of Capri, where the Victorian gay grand tour reached its most audacious heights. If Venice was a finishing school, Capri was the advanced degree, a sun-soaked island where the normal rules didn't just bend, they evaporated like morning mist over the Mediterranean. The archaeological evidence from Capri is even more extraordinary than Venice. In 2019, renovations at the Villa Certosa uncovered a sealed room containing what historians now call the Capri Archive, hundreds of photographs, letters and documents that reveal an entire shadow society operating in parallel to the official expatriate community. The photographs are staggering in their openness. Unlike the carefully staged classical images from Venice, the Capri photos show genuine moments of affection. There's you, Lord Alfred, swimming naked with 3 Italian boys at the Blue Grotto, all of you laughing at something outside the frame. There's a beach picnic where English gentlemen and Italian youths lie intertwined like a Baroque painting come to life. There's a series from a sunset party where someone has written on the back, Paradise, November 1894. Wish this could last forever. The ringleader of Capri's gay colony was Baron Wilhelm von Gloden, a German photographer who turned the island into his personal Arcadia. His villa, perched on the cliffs above Marina Piccola, was legendary. Even by Capri standards, the guest book recovered from the archive reads like a who's who of gay Victorian society. Oscar Wilde signing as Sebastian Melmoth, Somerset Maugham here for tuberculosis treatment, and at least a dozen members of Parliament, all suffering from various respiratory ailments that required extended Mediterranean cures. Von Gloden's contribution to the network went beyond hospitality. He essentially invented a new form of plausibly deniable homoeroticism, the anthropological. Photograph his images of local boys posed as ancient Greeks or Sicilian shepherds were sold throughout Europe as educational materials. Universities bought them, museums collected them. Your own father probably had some in his study, filed under classical reference materials, never suspecting his son was friends with the models, the barons. Business records found in a hidden compartment in his desk reveal the economics of desire. A simple portrait cost 5 lire, a classical study cost 20. A private modelling session cost whatever the client could afford, and based on the numbers, they could afford quite a lot. One English lord paid the equivalent of a working man's annual salary for a week of intensive photographic instruction. But Capri offered more than just photographic souvenirs. The island had developed an entire infrastructure for the gay grand tour. The Hotel Kisisana advertised rooms with connecting doors for travelling companions. The cafe Hidigigay served special coffee that was mostly brandy and looked the other way when patrons disappeared upstairs in pairs. The beach at Marina Piccola was unofficially designated as clothing optional for artistic sun studies. Your letters from this period, Lord Alfred, discovered in your Italian lover's descendant's attic in 1987, are revelatory. Dearest boy, one begins, Capri is what Greece must have been before Christianity ruined everything yesterday. We recreated the symposium on the beach, though with rather less philosophy and rather more swimming. The Baron says, I have the perfect Hellenic form, which is flattery, but I'll take it tomorrow. We sail to the Blue Grotto for what Giuseppe calls Neptune's birthday, which apparently involves no clothes and lots of wine. I may never return to foggy London. The social dynamics on Capri were fascinatingly different from Venice. While Venice required discretion, Capri celebrated openness, at least within the charmed circle. The archive contains programs from elaborate parties. The Bacchanalia, 1894, Hadrian's birthday celebration, the Feast of Antinous. These weren't subtle affairs. The invitation to one party specifies toga optional, inhibitions discouraged, wives strictly prohibited. The entertainment was equally bold. There are photographs of theatrical performances that would make modern pride parades look restrained English gentlemen. Performing Salome's dance, Italian youths dressed as nymphs, and what appears to be an entire production of Lysistrata with an all-male cast playing all roles, including the women, with historically inaccurate but anatomically impressive costumes. The Capri network had also developed sophisticated warning systems. A series of flags flown from the Baron's villa communicated different messages. White meant all clear. Yellow meant new arrivals, exercise caution. Red meant authorities present, maintain strictest propriety. Black meant someone's wife has arrived, evacuate immediately. The medical infrastructure was particularly clever. Dr. August Plun, the island's physician, specialized in treating nervous exhaustion and artistic temperament. His medical notes, donated to a medical museum and only recently recognized for what they really were, show hundreds of English patients suffering from conditions that required extended treatment involving sun therapy, sea bathing, and social rehabilitation. His prescriptions, written in Latin, often translate to things like more wine and fewer clothes, or intensive relaxation with sympathetic companions. The Capri archive also reveals the darker side of paradise. There are blackmail letters quickly resolved by the network's lawyers. There are warnings about specific individuals. Lord X arrives Tuesday, drinks too much and talks when drunk. There are coded references to suicide attempts. Boys who disappeared, lives ruined by indiscretion. Paradise had its price, and not everyone could pay it, but for those who could navigate its dangers, Capri offered something revolutionary. A glimpse of what life could be without shame. A letter from an anonymous English visitor, found pressed between the pages of a guest book, captures it perfectly. For 6 weeks I have lived as nature intended. I have loved without fear, laughed without restraint, and existed without apology. Tomorrow I return to London, to my marriage, to my seat in Parliament, to my life of careful lies. But I have tasted truth, and that can never be taken from me. Chapter 5. The Underground Railroad to Rome. By December 1894, the network has guided you south to Rome, where the gay grand tour reaches its most sophisticated and dangerous phase. Rome in the 1890s was a city of contradictions, the seat of papal authority and simultaneously home to one of Europe's most organized homosexual undergrounds. The evidence uncovered from the Pensione Albion near the Spanish Steps reveals an operation that makes Venice look amateur. The Pensione Albion, run by an English widow named Mrs. Peyton, definitely not. Her real name was supposedly a respectable boarding house for English gentlemen studying classical antiquities. The reality revealed in documents hidden inside hollowed-out books discovered during building renovations. In 2021 was far more interesting. Mrs. Peyton was actually Marcus Peyton, a former cavalry officer who'd fled England after a scandal, and his widow's weeds were the perfect disguise for running Rome's most exclusive gay safe house. The guest registry reads like a codebreaker's nightmare. Every name is false, but consistently false. The same pseudonyms appear in Venice, Capri, and Rome, creating a traceable network of identity. You're registered as Mr. Douglas of Queensberry, a darkly humorous choice given your father's rabid homophobia. Oscar Wilde appears as Mr. Ernest, years before his play would make the name famous. The Roman network had to be more careful than its counterparts. The Vatican's influence meant that getting caught could result in more than social embarrassment. The Papal States might have been dissolved, but the Church still had enormous power. The solution was brilliant: hide in plain sight by becoming exactly what you claim to be. Scholars of classical antiquity, the Peyton Academy, as residents called it, actually offered genuine classical education. The archive contains detailed lecture notes on Roman history, Greek poetry, and archaeological techniques, but read carefully, and the real curriculum emerges. A lecture on the sacred band of Thebes is really about how gay lovers fight harder to protect each other. A discussion of Hadrian's architectural innovations focuses extensively on his villa at Tivoli, where the emperor lived openly with Antinous. The photographs from Rome are more subtle than Capri, but more politically subversive. There's a series of English gentlemen posing at various classical sites, but always with the same young Italian guide, always touching just slightly more than necessary there. There's a magnificent image of a historical reenactment of a Roman banquet where everyone seems to have forgotten that Romans wore more than laurel wreaths and wine stains. The Roman operation had developed an elaborate system of safe houses and escape routes. A map found in the archive shows the city marked with symbols, green dots for friendly establishments, red crosses for places to avoid, and blue lines showing routes between safe houses that avoided main thoroughfares and police stations. It's essentially a gay underground railroad, complete with conductors, stations, and code words. Your Own Time in Rome, Lord Alfred, was particularly eventful. Letters discovered in the Vatican secret archives, released in 2019, show that you were under surveillance by church authorities who suspected you of corrupting Roman youth. The irony of this accusation, given Rome's 2,000-year history of corrupting everyone else's youth, was apparently lost on them. The surveillance reports are unintentionally hilarious. A Swiss guard followed you for a week and reported subject spends excessive time examining nude statuary, shows particular interest in buttocks of Marcus Aurelius. Equestrian statue met with known degenerates at Cafe Greco, ordered wine at 10. I'm clearly morally compromised. The guard seemed unaware that half of Rome's tourists could be described identically. The network's response to surveillance was ingenious. They developed what they called the classical defense. If questioned, immediately launch into lengthy, boring lectures about ancient art. A document titled Emergency Responses advises, if arrested near male brothel, claim you are researching juveniles. Satires, if found in compromising position, insist you are recreating classical wrestling holds. If caught with younger man, explain you're mentoring him in Platonic philosophy. The more boring your explanation, the quicker your release. The Roman network also pioneered what we now call corporate sponsorship. Wealthy gay men would fund archaeological expeditions that were really excuses to spend months in Italy with handsome research assistants. The British Museum unknowingly funded dozens of gay romances in the name of classical scholarship. Your Own Trip, officially sponsored by the Oxford Classical Society to study Ovid's influence on Renaissance poetry, produced exactly 0 scholarly papers, but numerous photographs of you influencing young Italians in ways Ovid would have appreciated. The medical establishment in Rome was surprisingly progressive. Dr. Giovanni Santo, physician to the English community, wrote in his private journal, discovered in his grandson's attic. These English boys arrive pale and miserable, convinced they are diseased. I tell them the only disease is their country's attitudes. I prescribe sunshine wine and the company of those who understand them. The cure rate is remarkable, but Rome also exposed the network's vulnerabilities. In December 1894, just as you were preparing to leave, a young English aristocrat named Henry Somerset was arrested in a police raid on a private party. The network mobilized immediately. Lawyers were summoned, bribes were paid, and Somerset was on a ship to Alexandria within 12 hours. But the incident sent shockwaves through the community. The party atmosphere of summer gave way to winter paranoia. Chapter 6. The Lavender Letters Home. As 1894 turns to 1895, you're back in Venice for one last week before returning to England. The Palazzo Mocenigo is quieter now. Winter has thinned the crowds, and news of arrests in Rome has made everyone cautious. But in Signor Benedetti's private study, something remarkable is happening. The compilation of what historians now call the Lavender Letters, the collective correspondence of the gay Grand Tour. The letters, over 300 of them found in the Palazzo's walls, create an extraordinary portrait of Victorian double lives. Each writer had to maintain 2 separate narratives, the official one for family and the real one for the network. The skill required to pull this off was remarkable. Your own letters home, Lord Alfred, are masterpieces of misdirection to your mother. Dearest Mamma, Venice continues to inspire my poetry. I spend my days in contemplation of Titian's use of colour, and my evenings in improving conversation with fellow scholars. The air here has done wonders for my constitution. To your lover in London, my darling boy, Venice has ruined me for England. How can I return to pretending indifference when I've lived months of passionate truth? Last night, Marco and I swam naked in the canal, and I thought I might die of happiness. The network had developed an entire system for safe correspondence letters between lovers. were sent through intermediaries often hidden inside books or artwork. The British Museum's archive, examined in 2020, revealed dozens of hollow book spines that once contained love letters, all catalogued as Italian Renaissance poetry volumes. The poetry was on the outside. The real passion was hidden within. Some writers developed elaborate codes. One correspondent used flower language. Roses meant, "I love you." Violets meant, "I'm being watched." And chrysanthemums meant, "My wife is getting suspicious." Another used musical notation, writing love letters that looked like sheet music. A third wrote everything as biblical commentary, turning gay desire into theological allegory. The most poignant letters are those that were never sent. The archive contains dozens of unsent confessions, declarations of love deemed too dangerous to mail. One reads, "If I could, I would shout from St. Mark's Campanile that I love you. Instead, I write it here, seal it in silence, and pretend that somewhere, somehow, you know." The financial records from this period reveal the true cost of the Grand Tour. It wasn't just hotels and train tickets. It was bribes, blackmail payments, legal fees, and the constant expense of maintaining elaborate cover stories. Your own accounts show you spent more on discretion insurance than on accommodation. The network operated its own informal bank, lending money to those who needed quick escapes and collecting from those who could afford to pay. But the letters also reveal moments of unexpected joy and humour. There's a correspondence between two English lords comparing their Italian lovers like wine vintages. My Giovanni is a robust Chianti, bold, immediate, leaves you slightly dizzy. Or Alessandro sounds more like a refined Barolo, complex, age-worthy, best appreciated. Slowly, another writer complains, "The boy swears he loves me, but he also swore he was 23. He's clearly 19. Do Italian years count differently?" The medical correspondence is particularly fascinating. Doctors within the network wrote to each other about treating what they called the English condition, the psychological damage of lifelong repression. Dr. Santo in Rome writes to Dr. Plun in Capri. They arrive so damaged by shame that they cannot accept pleasure without guilt. It takes weeks to convince them that desire is not disease. I sometimes think England is one vast asylum where the inmates run the institution. As your departure approaches, the letters become more melancholic. The reality of return to marriages, to parliament, to lives of careful performance weighs on everyone. A group letter signed by 12 men preparing to leave reads like a manifesto. We, the undersigned, having tasted freedom, swear to protect and support each other. In the prison of home we shall meet at the Reform Club every third Thursday. Speak in code and remember that we were for a brief glorious moment ourselves. The network prepared detailed instructions for maintaining sanity in England. Keep a diary, but in Greek. Frame your photographs, but display them in your study, not the drawing room. Maintain correspondence with art dealers in Italy. Plan your next escape before the current one ends. Remember, you are not alone. You are not diseased. And you will return. Your final letter from Venice, written to Oscar Wilde, survives in the Wilde family archive. Oscar, my dear, I leave tomorrow for the grey shores of home. I'm bringing back 3 trunks of clothes, 50 photographs I can never display, and a heart so full of illegal happiness I'm surprised customs doesn't arrest me. Thank you for introducing me to this world. I understand now why you say that when one has been to heaven, hell becomes merely inconvenient. The last document in the archive is a group photograph taken. On your departure day, 23 men stand on the Palazzo's water stairs dressed in their travelling clothes, trying to look respectable. If you look closely, you can see the signs, the touches that linger, the gazes that hold too long, the smiles that know. Too much at the bottom. Someone has written, "The Brotherhood of Beautiful Sinners, Venice, January 1895. Until we meet again as our journey through the gay Grand Tour concludes tonight, we're reminded that the past is far from dusty and dull. It's a vibrant, often surprising, and always intriguing tapestry woven with human ingenuity, resilience, and the occasional ancient history that still makes us wonder until our next archaeological adventure together. This is the sleeping archaeologist, encouraging you to remain curious about the incredible tales still waiting to be discovered beneath our feet. Sweet dreams, fellow explorers. Don't forget to subscribe, and may your rest be filled with wonder at the remarkable tapestry of human history. But for now, Stay tuned as we have a bonus story coming right up especially for you from our guest narrator.
Our next story is entitled The Real Reason Medieval People Smelled and It's Not. What you think? Let's be honest. You have a picture in your head when I say medieval peasant. What do you see? You see a guy named Giles or something covered head to toe in a sort of generic brown-gray filth, as if he's just crawled. Out of a bog, his teeth look like a condemned Stonehenge, and his hair has more grease than a deep-fat fryer at a county fair. You imagine he smells like a combination of old cheese, wet dog, and profound regret. For centuries, this has been the default image served up by movies and television. The assumption is that people in the Middle Ages were just naturally opposed to soap, that they woke up, looked at a bucket of clean water, and thought, no, I think I'll just marinate in my own essence for another decade. This popular image suggests a world where personal hygiene was not just neglected, but actively shunned, as if being clean was a moral failing. We're told they were ignorant, lazy, or perhaps just so religious, they believed cleanliness was next to godlessness. We picture them stumbling through their short, brutish lives, caked in the grime of their own existence, blissfully unaware that a bar of soap and a bit of effort could dramatically improve their social prospects. It's a convenient cartoon, one that makes us feel wonderfully advanced with our indoor plumbing and our bewildering array of scented shower gels. It's a caricature of profound historical ignorance, a comfortable lie. We tell ourselves about the past to make our present feel more sanitized. We imagine their lack of bathing was a simple choice born of a simple mind, but the truth is infinitely more complex, more dangerous, and frankly more interesting than that. It wasn't about a lack of desire to be clean. It was about economics, infrastructure, and a mortal terror of the very thing that was supposed to make them healthy. The idea that they were just lazy and dirty is completely, laughably wrong. Tonight, you are not a peasant. You are a master carpenter in London, in the year of our Lord, 1345. Your name is John, and you are good at what you do. You have a workshop, apprentices, and a decent home above your shop. You own more than one set of clothes. And the central surprising truth of your life is this: staying clean is one of the most expensive, time-consuming, and genuinely dangerous things you do. The proof of your struggle, the literal receipts for your desire to be clean, weren't found in a castle or a monastery. They were found by archaeologists. Centuries later, at the bottom of cesspits and trash heaps in the heart of London, in the very places you'd expect to find nothing but filth, they discovered delicate carved bone combs for keeping your hair tidy. They found small metal tweezers perfect for plucking stray hairs. They unearthed ear scoops, tiny metal tools for, well, you can guess, and most tellingly, they found lead tokens stamped with the insignia of local bathhouses. Think of them as the medieval equivalent of a gift card for a spa day. These weren't the artifacts of people who had given up on hygiene. They were the tools of people who were fighting a daily uphill battle just to feel human, a battle for which we now have the archaeological evidence. This discovery, made in excavations across medieval cities, reveals something extraordinary about the practical realities of daily life. As we settle in tonight, we're going to uncover not just what archaeologists found, but what it tells us about the surprisingly relatable lives of people who lived in 14th century London. Now, dim the lights and prepare to discover why this story will change how you think about taking a bath. The first thing you notice when you wake up is the noise. It's not the gentle hum of a modern city. It's a cacophony of life, raw and unfiltered. Your home is a timber-framed building, a narrow three-story structure leaning companionably against its neighbors on a busy London street. Your workshop, filled with the comforting scent of sawdust and beeswax, occupies the ground floor. You, your wife, and your children live in the 2 rooms above. The floorboards are wide, uneven oak, and through them you can already hear the rhythmic scrape and thump of your 2 apprentices starting their day. Below, they've been up since before dawn, and their youthful energy is both a blessing for your business and a curse on your sleep. Outside your window, the city is already a roaring river of sound: the clatter of wooden cartwheels on cobblestones, the iron-shod hooves of horses, the bellowing of a merchant selling eels, the shriek of a pig that has escaped its pen and is now enjoying a brief, glorious taste of freedom And beneath it all, the constant multilingual hum of thousands of people, crammed into a space far too small. For them, London, in 1345, is a marvel of the world, a thriving hub of commerce and power, but it is also profoundly inescapably crowded. There is no concept of personal space. As we would know it, your neighbor's window is close enough to pass a cup of ale through, and you know far more about their domestic squabbles than you'd care to admit. You swing your legs out of the bed. A sturdy oak frame with a mattress stuffed with straw. It's not uncomfortable, but you make a mental note that it's time to change the straw again. Your feet touch the cold floorboards. The air in the room is chilly, carrying the damp scent of the nearby Thames and the lingering smell of wood smoke from last night's fire. There is no central heating. Of course, the only warmth comes from the hearth in your main living area, which also serves as your kitchen. Now begins the first ritual of your day, the one that defines the boundary between the grime of the world and the dignity of your person. This is the act of the dry clean. In the corner of the room is a wooden stand holding a ceramic basin and a pitcher. The water in the pitcher is cold. It was hauled yesterday by your apprentice from the great conduit at Cheapside, a public fountain that provides cleaner water than the Thames, which is, to put it mildly, the city's communal toilet. That water is a precious commodity. It represents a significant expenditure of time and energy. To just splash it around thoughtlessly would be like lighting a fire with silver coins. So you pour a small amount into the basin, not enough for a good soak, but enough to wet a linen cloth. You inherited a belief passed down through generations that linen is a remarkable fabric. It is absorbent and slightly abrasive. When wet, you scrub your face, your hands, your neck, and your underarms with the damp cloth. It's an invigorating, if brisk, experience. The linen lifts the sweat and dirt from the night, and the friction, you've been told, is good for the skin. This isn't a bath, not by a long shot, but it is a conscious act of hygiene. It's maintenance. It's what you do every single day. Next, you reach for a small pot of ointment. It's made from animal fat and scented with herbs from your wife's small window box, lavender and rosemary. You rub a little on your skin to combat the chafing and dryness of city life. Then you take out your comb. It's your prized possession, carved from a piece of deer antler, with fine teeth on one side and coarse teeth on the other. You meticulously work it through your hair and your beard, removing any tangles and bits of workshop debris. This isn't just about vanity. A clean, well-combed head of hair is less likely to host lice, a constant and unwelcome companion in medieval life. You are a master craftsman, a respected member of the Carpenters Guild. Your appearance matters. It signals your status, your reliability, and your health. Showing up to a client's house looking like you've been sleeping in a ditch is bad for business. The most important part of your daily hygiene, however, isn't about water at all. It's about your clothes. You strip off the linen shirt you slept in. This is your primary defense against the world. Unlike your heavy wool tunic and hose, which are difficult and expensive to clean, your linen undergarments can be washed relatively easily. They are your body's blotting paper. They absorb the sweat, the oils, and the grime of daily life, wicking it away from your skin and trapping it in the fabric. A clean linen shirt, changed regularly, is the medieval secret to staying clean. You have several of them, a sign of your relative prosperity. Poorer folk might only have one worn until it practically disintegrates. You put on a fresh one, and the feeling of the clean, crisp fabric against your skin is a small but profound luxury. It's a shield you're now ready to face the day you've used less than a pint of water, a bit of herbal ointment, and a clean shirt to a modern observer. You might still seem unwashed, but in the context of your world, you have performed a careful, resource-conscious ritual of personal maintenance. You are clean enough for now. The real challenge isn't this small morning routine. The real challenge is the pervasive, inescapable filth of the world just outside your door, and the monumental effort it would take to achieve a state of true, immersive cleanliness. You pull on your woolen tunic, your hose, and your thick leather shoes, and you can already smell the sawdust calling. But you are also thinking about that invitation to the guild dinner next week for This simple morning wash will not be nearly enough. You're going to need a bath, and that, is where the trouble begins. The decision to take a proper bath is not one you make lightly. It's the medieval equivalent of deciding to renovate your kitchen. It requires planning, a significant budget, and an acceptance that things could go horribly wrong. Your day-to-day existence is a constant negotiation. With dirt, your workshop floor is a perpetual carpet of sawdust, wood shavings, and the occasional dollop of glue. The street outside your door is a slurry of mud, animal dung, and discarded refuse. You wash your hands meticulously before every meal, your wife insisting on it, using a small bowl of water with a sprig of rosemary in it to cut the grime. But the dirt is tenacious. It gets into the grain of the wood. You work under your fingernails and into the very fabric of your clothes. After a few days of heavy work on a new set of choir stalls for the local church, you feel gritty. The fine dust of the oak has settled into every pore. Your hair feels stiff, and you have a persistent sense of being coated in a thin film of your own labor. It's a feeling of satisfaction, a testament to your hard work, but it's also deeply uncomfortable. The guild dinner is in 2 days. You will be sitting with the wardens of your company, wealthy men who can make or break your career. You need to be presentable. You need to be clean, truly clean. So you face a choice. Option 1, the home bath. This sounds cozy, private, and safe. It is none of those things. Let's break down the logistics first. The water, you'll need a lot of it, not just the pitcher your apprentice fetches each morning, but gallons and gallons. This means either sending the boy back and forth to the public conduit a dozen times, a process that will take hours and earn you the glares of everyone else in the queue, or paying a professional water carrier, a cob, to deliver it. These men haul massive barrels on their shoulders or on carts, and they charge by the bucket to fill a wooden tub big enough for you to sit in. Would cost several pence. To put that in perspective, a skilled laborer like yourself might earn 4 or 5 pence for an entire day's work. You'd be spending about half a day's wages just on the water. But you can't just sit in a tub of cold water. That's not a bath. It's a punishment. You need hot water, and for that, you need fire. Your small hearth is fine for cooking a pot of stew, but it's not designed to heat 20 gallons of water. You would need to build a much larger fire, using a significant amount of your precious firewood or charcoal, which, again, costs money. You'd have to heat the water in smaller batches in your largest iron cauldron, a slow and smoky process that would fill your small living quarters with steam and the risk of stray sparks. Remember, you live in a house made almost entirely of wood, pressed up against other houses made of wood. An uncontrolled fire is not a minor accident. It is a neighborhood-destroying catastrophe. The entire city is a tinderbox, and the sound of the parish church bells ringing the alarm for a fire is a sound that strikes terror into every heart, assuming you manage to heat the water without burning down your street. You then have to get it from the hearth to the tub. The tub is a heavy oak barrel, and it's currently in the workshop you and your apprentices would have. To haul it up the narrow, winding stairs to your living quarters, then comes the truly perilous part, transferring the scalding water from the cauldron to the tub, 1 bucket at a time. The floor is uneven. The steam makes everything slick. A single misstep could result in a horrific, life-altering burn. There are no modern emergency rooms. A bad burn often means a slow, agonizing infection and quite possibly death. So the home bath, your supposed sanctuary of private cleanliness, is in fact a costly, time-consuming, and physically dangerous ordeal. It's a project you might undertake a few times a year, perhaps before Christmas or Easter, but it is not a casual weekend activity. This brings you to option 2. The public bathhouse. London has several of them known colloquially as stews. They are in many ways the heart of the city's social life here. For a single penny, you can get a hot bath. For a little more, you can get a scrub from an attendant, a meal, and a glass of wine. It's a one-stop shop for cleanliness and leisure. It sounds like a perfect solution. The cost is manageable. There's no risk of burning your own house down, and all the water is heated and hauled by someone else. But the bathhouse has a reputation. It's a place of business, yes, where merchants discuss contracts while soaking in the steam, but it's also a place of other business. The name stews is also slang for a brothel. While some bathhouses are respectable establishments, many are not. Going to the stews can be a mark against your character. The church preaches against them constantly, decrying them as dens of sin and temptation, where men and women bathe together in a flagrant display of immorality. You are a respectable guildsman. Your reputation is your most valuable asset. Being seen entering the wrong kind of bathhouse could lead to gossip, which could lead to a loss of business. And then there is the other fear, a deeper and more primal one. It's the fear of disease. You don't understand germs. Of course, the concept of microscopic organisms is centuries away, but you do understand contagion. You know that sickness can pass from one person to another, and the prevailing medical theory based on the teachings of ancient Greeks like Galen is that the body's health is a matter of balance. It's believed that illness can enter the body through the pores of the skin. A hot bath, which opens up the pores, is seen by many physicians as a dangerous invitation for bad air or pestilence to seep into your very being. You'd be sharing the bathwater with dozens of other people, any one of whom could be carrying an illness. The bathhouse, a place of cleansing, could also be a place of contamination. It's a terrible paradox. So, this is your choice. Risk burning down your home and spending a small fortune for a private bath, or risk your reputation and your health for a public one. Neither is ideal. Neither is simple. Every citizen of London faces this same dilemma. You look at your hands, the ingrained dirt in the calluses. You think of the guild dinner of the warden looking you over with his critical eye. The decision is made. You will go to the bathhouse, but you'll go to the respectable one near St. Paul's, the one frequented by other craftsmen. You'll take the risk. You just hope it's the right one. The thought sends a small cold shiver down your spine that has nothing to do with the morning chill. The day of the bath arrives. You finish your work early, handing over the workshop to your senior apprentice with a series of stern instructions. You change out of your work clothes and into your second-best tunic, the one made of good English wool, dyed a respectable russet brown. Going to the bathhouse is an event, and you dress for it. Your wife hands you a small linen pouch. Inside is a penny for the bath itself, another half-penny in case you decide you want a meal, and a small hard lump of soap. This soap is a household treasure. It's not the fragrant, colorful bar you'd find today. It's a dense brownish block made from mutton fat and wood ash, boiled together for hours in a backyard cauldron. It has a strong, sharp smell, and it's caustic enough to take off a layer of skin if you're not careful, but it cuts through grease and grime like nothing else. Some people use fuller's earth or fragrant herbs like soapwort, but for a deep clean, nothing beats proper lye soap. You tuck the pouch into your belt along with a clean linen towel. The bathhouse provides towels, but you trust your own. You step out onto the street. The mid-afternoon sun is weak, filtered through a haze of wood smoke that perpetually hangs over the city. The air is thick with the smells of life, the savory scent of a nearby cook shop, roasting chickens, the acrid tang of a tannery down the lane, the unmistakable aroma of hundreds of horses, and thousands of people living in close quarters. You navigate the crowded thoroughfare, sidestepping a pile of discarded oyster shells, nodding to a fellow guildsman, and deftly avoiding a stream of dirty water thrown from an upstairs window. This is the sensory world you are trying to wash away. Even as you walk through it, you arrive at the bathhouse. It's a large timber-framed building, distinguished from its neighbors by a painted sign depicting a bathtub and the steam billowing from its open doors. You step inside, and the change in atmosphere is immediate. You move from the cool, clammy air of the street into a wall of warm, moist heat. The air is thick with steam and smells of damp wood, herbs, and warm bodies. The noise of the city is replaced by a more intimate soundscape: the splash of water, the low murmur of conversations, the clinking of cups. A man at the entrance, the bathkeeper, takes your penny in exchange. He hands you a small lead token. The kind archaeologists will one day puzzle over. This is your ticket. You proceed into a disrobing room, a small antechamber with wooden benches along the walls. Here, men are in various states of undress, chatting and laughing. There is a sense of camaraderie, of shared purpose. You are all here to shed the grime of the world. For a few hours you strip down, folding your clothes neatly and placing them on a bench. You are vulnerable now, equal to the man next to you, whether he's a stonemason or a fishmonger. Class and profession are temporarily left behind with your tunic and hose wrapping, your towel around your waist. You walk through a final doorway and into the main bathing room. It's a large, cavernous space with a high vaulted ceiling to let the steam escape. The floor is paved with stone, slick with water. In the center of the room are two enormous wooden tubs, each large enough to hold a dozen men. They are filled with steaming water heated by a furnace in a room below, the smoke channeled out through a chimney. The water is not the crystal clear chlorinated water of a modern pool. It has a slightly cloudy grayish tinge from the bodies that have been in it and the minerals from the well it was drawn from, but it is hot. And that is what matters. You ease yourself into one of the tubs. The heat is a shock at first, but then it sinks into your muscles, loosening the knots of tension from days spent hunched over a workbench. You lean back against the wooden side, letting out a long sigh of relief. The water laps at your chest. Around you, men are talking business, sharing gossip, or simply soaking in silence. Bath attendant, a young boy, comes by with a tray of wooden cups filled with ale. You hand him your halfpenny and take one. The cool, bitter ale is a perfect contrast to the heat of the water. This is more than just getting clean. It's a social ritual. It's the medieval version of going to the pub or the coffee shop. You see a merchant you've been trying to get a contract with and exchange a friendly nod. You overhear a piece of juicy gossip about a rival guild. This is where the city's informal business is conducted, where relationships are forged in the steam. After soaking for a while, you get to work. You take out your lump of soap and begin to scrub. You wash your hair, your beard, your entire body, working up a meager lather. The water around you turns a shade darker. An attendant offers you a scrubbing with a handful of fragrant herbs, but you decline. You're here on a mission. Once you feel thoroughly clean, you stand up and an attendant sluices you with a bucket of slightly cooler, cleaner water. A final rinse to wash away the soap and the last of the dirt. You step out of the tub, feeling reborn. Your skin is pink and soft. Your muscles are relaxed. You feel lighter, both physically and mentally. You dry yourself with your linen towel and head back to the dressing room. As you put on your clothes, they feel different. Your clean skin against the familiar wool of your tunic is a sensation of pure comfort. You feel presentable. You feel dignified. You feel ready to meet with the guild wardens. But as you step back out into the cool evening air, a familiar anxiety returns. The bathhouse was a sanctuary, but it was a shared one. You remember the man who was coughing near you in the tub, the general cloudiness of the water. You've scrubbed the dirt from your skin, but you can't help but wonder what else you might have picked up. You've opened your pores to the healing warmth, but what if you've also opened them to something more sinister? The fear is a quiet, nagging thought at the back of your mind. You've done what you needed to do to maintain your place in society, but there is always a price. For now, though, you are clean, and as you walk home through the darkening streets of London, that feeling is enough. The city's filth can wait until tomorrow. Tonight, you are a new man. You just have to hope the price wasn't too high. The days following your visit to the bathhouse are good ones. You feel refreshed, and the guild dinner is a success. You secure a promising new commission from one of the wardens to build a new set of carved screens for his private chapel. Your clean appearance and confident demeanor made a good impression. Your small investment in the bathhouse paid off. Your wife comments on how much better you smell, and even your apprentices seem to treat you with a renewed sense of respect. The small anxieties about disease begin to fade, replaced by the familiar rhythms of work and family life. In 14th century, London is a tapestry woven with these moments of simple, hard-won comfort. A successful business deal, a warm meal at the end of a long day, the feeling of clean linen on clean skin. These are the things that make the hardships bearable. The hardships, of course, are ever present. You see them every day. You see the beggars with their missing limbs and scarred faces. You hear the church bells tolling for the dead, a near constant sound in a city where life is fragile. Childbirth is a perilous journey for every woman, and a simple infection from a splinter in your hand could be a death sentence. You live with a background level of risk that would be unimaginable to a modern person. It's not that you're callous, you're just Accustomed to it, it's the water you swim in. This acceptance of risk is why the bathhouse, despite its potential dangers, remains so popular. It offers a tangible reward: cleanliness, relaxation, social connection in exchange for a theoretical risk. You weigh the odds every day. In 100 different ways, is this piece of fish fresh enough to eat? Is that street safe to walk down at night? Is the bathhouse worth the potential for sickness for most of your life? The answer to that last question has been yes. But then the world begins to change. It starts with whispers, strange rumors carried by sailors and merchants from distant ports in the east. They speak of a terrible pestilence, a sickness so swift and deadly it can wipe out entire towns in a matter of weeks. They call it the Great Mortality. At first, it's just a story, a frightening tale from a faraway land. No, more real than a dragon or a griffin. You hear it discussed in the marketplace and in the taverns, but it doesn't touch your life. It's someone else's problem. Then in the summer of 1348, it arrives. It comes ashore in the south of England and begins its relentless march across the country. By autumn, it is in London. The familiar tolling of the church bells becomes incessant, a frantic, desperate rhythm that never stops day or night. The death carts begin to make their rounds, their drivers calling out, "Bring out your dead," a sound that will haunt the city for generations. The Black Death is unlike any sickness you have ever known. It is terrifyingly indiscriminate. It takes the young and the old, the rich and the poor, the pious and the sinner. Friends you shared an ale with last week are gone. Entire families on your street disappear behind doors marked with a red cross. The city, once so full of life and noise, becomes a place of fear and silence. The air, always thick with smoke, now carries a new sweet, cloying smell of decay. The physicians are powerless. They try their strange and useless remedies: bleeding, purging, potions made of crushed emeralds and unicorn horn. Nothing works. The priests tell you it is the wrath of God, a punishment for the sins of mankind. People flock to the churches praying for deliverance, but they die in the pews. In the midst of this terror, a new medical consensus begins to form, born of desperation. The learned men, the physicians, and scholars look for a cause, a way the disease is spreading, and they fixate on the old fear, the idea of sickness entering the body through the skin. They look at the bathhouses, these warm, steamy communal spaces where hundreds of people gather, where the pores of the body are opened wide, and they declare them to be death traps. Public notices are posted. The King's Council, on the advice of the College of Physicians, orders the closure of all public bathhouses. It's not a moral crusade by the church anymore. It's a public health emergency. The very places you once went to feel clean and healthy are now branded as centers of contagion. The idea takes root with terrifying speed. To bathe in hot water is to invite the plague into your body. Cleanliness, once a sign of status and health, is suddenly associated with recklessness and death. The bathhouse on your street, the one with the steam billowing from its doors, goes quiet. Its fires are extinguished. Its great tubs are drained. The cheerful sound of splashing and conversation is replaced by an eerie silence. And you, like everyone else, adapt. You stop going. The risk is no longer theoretical. It's lethally real. Your hygiene routine changes, becomes more insular, more focused on what you can do within the relative safety of your own home. You rely more than ever on your linen undergarments, changing them with an almost religious devotion. You scrub your hands and face with cold water and lye soap, but the idea of a full immersive hot bath now fills you with a deep-seated dread. You teach your children to do the same. Over time, this becomes the new normal. The plague eventually recedes, leaving a scarred and emptier London in its wake. Nearly half the city's population is gone, but the fear remains. The bathhouses do not reopen. The cultural habit has been broken, shattered by trauma. For the next few centuries, public bathing will largely disappear from English life. People will continue to keep clean using basins and linen and combs, but the communal celebratory act of the hot bath will become a distant memory associated with a time of unimaginable death. This is the great, tragic irony. The decline in bathing during the late medieval and early modern period was not a slide into lazy ignorance. It was a direct result of a catastrophic pandemic, and the best medical advice of the time, it was a rational response to a terrifying threat. You didn't stop bathing because you stopped caring about being clean. You stopped bathing because you were terrified of dying, and this fear passed down through generations would eventually curdle into the historical myth we know today, the myth of the great unwashed, the dirty, smelly medieval peasant who simply didn't know any better, but you knew better. You just lived in a world where a hot bath was a gamble with your own life, and eventually the odds just became too high. Archaeological receipts found in your cesspits, the combs, the tweezers, the bath tokens are not just objects. They are testaments to a time before the fear, a time when being clean was a luxury worth fighting for. They are the echoes of a lost world of communal bathing, a world that was washed away not by dirt but by death. As we look back, it's easy to judge, it's easy to see the flaws in their medical understanding, to scoff at the idea of disease entering through the pores, but to do so is to miss the point. You, the 14th century carpenter, were not stupid. You were living through a trauma we can barely comprehend, and you were making the best decisions you could with the information you had. Your world was not a simple cartoon of filth and ignorance. It was a complex, challenging, and often terrifying place where the simple act of taking a bath was fraught with a web of economic, social, and mortal dangers. The cesspits of London, where archaeologists found those intimate tools of daily life, tell a more truthful story. A cesspit is a sealed anaerobic environment, meaning there's no oxygen. This creates an incredible state of preservation for organic materials like wood, leather, and fabric that would normally rot away. So when archaeologists excavate these sites, they are opening a time capsule of everyday life. They are not just finding pottery shards, they are finding the very fabric of your world. They find the leather of your shoes worn thin at the heel. They find the scraps of wool from your tunic and the delicate weave of your linen undergarments, giving us a real tangible sense of what you wore. They find the cherry pits and fish bones from your dinner, telling them about your diet. And amongst all this domestic refuse, they find the evidence of your desire for cleanliness, not just the combs and the bath tokens, but things like manicure, sets with tiny files and picks. They find remnants of soap-making operations. These aren't the artifacts of a people who embraced filth. They are the artifacts of a people who, in the face of incredible obstacles, still tried. They still combed their hair, tweezed their brows, and sought out the profound comfort of a hot bath when they could. These discoveries force us to revise our cartoonish stereotypes. They replace the image of the mud-caked peasant with a much more nuanced and human portrait, a portrait of you, John the carpenter, weighing the cost of firewood against the need to feel clean, of you navigating the social minefield of the public stews, of you meticulously caring for your linen shirts, your first and best line of defense against the grime of the world, and finally, a portrait of you living through the terror of the Black Death, a cataclysm that so fundamentally rewired your society that even the simple act of bathing became a source of fear. This story isn't just about soap and water. It's about how societies respond to crisis. It's about how easily cultural norms can be shattered and reformed by fear. The shift away from bathing wasn't a failure of hygiene. It was a desperate, if misguided, attempt at survival. A powerful reminder that the practices of the past often had a complex logic that is invisible to us, until we dig a little deeper, sometimes literally into the soil beneath our feet. The people of the Middle Ages weren't so different from us. They wanted to be clean, comfortable, and healthy. They just had to navigate a world where achieving those simple things was far more difficult and dangerous than we can possibly imagine. They weren't dirty because they were lazy. They were dirty because life was hard, and staying clean was harder, as our journey through the daily struggles of a 14th century Londoner concludes. Tonight, we're reminded that the past is far from dusty and dull. It's a vibrant, often surprising, and always intriguing tapestry woven with human ingenuity, resilience, and the occasional ancient mystery that still makes us wonder. This is the sleeping archaeologist, encouraging you to remain curious about the incredible tales still waiting to be discovered beneath our feet, the latest from Pompeii, new discoveries still emerging from the ashes. Alright, let's just get this out of the way. When you hear Pompeii, doesn't your brain immediately conjure up images of toga-clad senators, dramatic plaster casts, and perhaps a very dusty history textbook? Maybe you think it's all been dug up, cataloged, and neatly filed away. A done deal, a historical closed case. After all, Vesuvius blew its top, froze the moment, and for centuries we've been picking at its bones. What more could possibly be left to find? Surely any new discovery is just another broken pot, another slightly less impressive wall painting. Tonight we're going to put that rather comfortable, slightly lazy assumption firmly to bed, or at least tuck it in with a story that proves it gloriously, utterly wrong. Tonight, are the proprietor of a thriving little eatery, a thermopolium. In the bustling Reggio 5 district of Pompeii, it's the year 79. CE, and the midday sun warms the cobbled streets. You are not some patrician lounging in a villa, nor a stoic philosopher pondering the cosmos. No, tonight you are a hands-on, quick-witted entrepreneur, a freedman by the name of Eutychus, whose daily grind involves ensuring the good folk of Pompeii get their fill of piping hot food and cool drinks. You're living proof that Pompeii wasn't just about the elites. It was a city of grinders, of dreamers, and of people just trying to make a living, sometimes with surprisingly sophisticated flair. And the proof, my friends, is in the pudding, or rather the archaeological receipts. We're talking about a spectacularly preserved snack bar, the Thermopolium of Reggio 5, complete with vibrant, almost shockingly fresh frescoes depicting ducks, chickens, and a rather flirtatious nereid riding a seahorse. But it's not just the art. It's the physical evidence, the deep imprints on the counter, where serving dishes once sat the traces of duck, pig, goat, and even fish, and snails found in terracotta pots ready for sale. It's a snapshot not of a grand villa, but of everyday life so complete it forces us to rewrite our understanding of this ancient metropolis. This discovery, made just a few years ago, reveals something extraordinary about Pompeii. As we settle in tonight, we're going to uncover not just what archaeologists found, but what it tells us about the surprisingly relatable lives of people who lived in this Roman city mere moments before its tragic end. But before we begin this journey together, write in the comments where you are listening from. It's fascinating to learn where in the world you are. Also, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Now, dim the lights and prepare to discover why this story will change how you think about the life and death of Pompeii. Chapter 1. The Flavor of Final Moments. So, there you are, Eutychus, wiping down the polished marble counter of your Thermopolium. The mid-morning rush has subsided, but the air still hums with the memory of voices, the clatter of terracotta bowls, and the lingering aroma of spiced lentils and warm wine. You run a popular establishment known for its hearty fare and the artistic flair of its counter. Imagine, if you will, tracing your fingers over the vibrant fresco painted right onto your serving area. There's a proud, strutting rooster, a duck suspended by its feet, ready for the pot, and then a stunningly sensual nereid, a sea nymph riding a seahorse. These aren't just pretty pictures, they're your menu, your brand, your ancient advertising campaign telling customers exactly what they could expect from your kitchen. It's like having a giant, exquisitely painted menu board, but instead of neon, it's all natural pigments. And a master's touch, this Thermopolium in Reggio 5, uncovered with incredible care by modern archaeologists, wasn't just a find, it was the find that truly brought Pompeii's everyday pulse back to life. Think about it. For decades, our understanding of Pompeii was heavily skewed towards the grand villas of the wealthy. We saw their art, their sprawling gardens, their elaborate mosaic floors. But what about the majority? What about the folks who grabbed a quick bite on their way to the forum, or the laborers looking for a cheap hot meal? This Thermopolium is their story, and now it's your story. The archaeologists, with their meticulous brushes and modern digital imaging, found amphorae, those tall, pointed storage jars still nestled in racks, probably holding wine or olive oil, But the real treasure was inside the dolia, large terracotta jars permanently set into the counter, the ancient equivalent of hot food wells. What they found there was astonishing traces of duck bones, pig scraps, even goat, and not just meat. There were remnants of fish and snails mixed with broad beans. It wasn't a fine dining experience, but it was varied, hearty, and remarkably sophisticated. This wasn't just gruel, this was fast food with flavor. Ingredients clearly chosen with care. Eutychus were feeding a diverse clientele, from the working man to the occasional merchant. The discovery was so fresh, so vivid, it felt like the cooks had just stepped away for a moment. They even found remnants of fava beans used to modify the taste of wine. Imagine the sensory overload, the sizzle of meat, the clink of cups, the lively chatter, the warm smell of spices and bread. This wasn't a dead city. It was a vibrant, aromatic snapshot of life, literally frozen in time, and it challenges the notion that ancient diets were monotonous or purely vegetarian. For the common folk, you are offering a robust, protein-rich menu, quite unlike the bland porridge that some historians used to imagine as the sun begins its slow arc towards the west, casting long shadows across the Pompeian streets. You might be thinking about the evening rush, the final preparations for another busy dinner service, but what you couldn't know, what no one in Pompeii could have imagined, was that in just a few short weeks, the very volcano that loomed so majestically in the distance would unleash its fury, turning this vibrant, delicious reality into an archaeological puzzle for future generations to solve. And as we'll see, the puzzles this thermopolium presented only got more intriguing, revealing deeper layers of life in the city of Vesuvius. Chapter 2. Echoes of 1,000 meals. You, Eutychus, are a man of routines, the clatter of bowls, the warmth of the brazier, the familiar faces of your regulars. These are the rhythms of your day. But as archaeologists delved deeper into your thermopolium, the discoveries went beyond just the menu. They began to reveal the central mystery of how people lived and died in this very spot. What else was hidden beneath the volcanic debris, ready to spill its secrets? This wasn't just a simple snack bar. It was a social hub, a place where stories unfolded and sometimes where lives tragically ended. One of the most compelling aspects of this particular thermopolium was the discovery of human remains. Not just one, but two individuals found near the counter. One was an older man, perhaps an employee or a customer seeking shelter from the ashfall discovered on a cot. The other, an adult male, likely in his 50s, was found with his arms outstretched as if trying to push away the encroaching doom. They were caught mid-moment, a stark reminder that life, even in its most mundane routines, can be interrupted without warning. And yet, even in their tragic finality, these remains offered profound insights. Consider the older man on the cot. He wore a heavy wool cloak, suggesting the chill that might have accompanied the initial ashfall, or simply the daily garb of the time around him. Objects were scattered. Small bowl, a piece of fabric. These weren't just random items, they were extensions of his daily life, perhaps a last meal, a comfort item. And for those of us trying to piece together the fragments of an ancient existence, these seemingly small details are massive. They help us understand not just what people ate, but how they dressed, what personal items they valued, and where they sought refuge in their final moments. Then there was the man. With outstretched arms, his posture tells a story of panic, of a desperate, futile struggle against an unstoppable force. But what truly intrigued archaeologists was the state of his bones, particularly his legs, which showed evidence of lesions. This wasn't just a detail, it was a clue. It suggested he might have been suffering from a bone infection, perhaps limiting his mobility. Imagine, if you will, the terror of Vesuvius erupting, the sky raining ash and pumice, and your body failing you. It adds a layer of poignant vulnerability to an already heartbreaking scene. These human remains, meticulously studied, help us connect with these individuals on a deeply personal level. They weren't just Romans or Pompeians, they were people with names, with daily struggles, with hopes and fears, just like us. And their final moments, captured in the very fabric of the disaster, speak volumes about the indiscriminate nature of such an event. You, Eutychus, might have known these men. Perhaps the older man was a loyal customer, stopping by every day for his usual. Maybe the man with the lesions was a new face, seeking a moment of respite from his illness. The mystery deepens, prompting us to ask not just what happened, but who were they? And this, dear listeners, is the beauty of modern archaeology. It's not just about digging, it's about detecting. It's about using advanced forensics, chemical analysis, and genetic studies to wring every last drop of information. From these ancient bones, it's about giving voice to the voiceless, bringing individual stories into sharp human focus. What these two individuals tell us, alongside the menus and the art, is that Pompeii was a city of real people facing extraordinary circumstances and doing their best to survive. But these finds, compelling as they are just the tip of the iceberg. What else did the very walls of your thermopolium reveal about the people of Pompeii were about? To find out, and it's far more colorful than you might expect. Chapter 3. The Murals and the Muses of Reggio 5. You're not just a thermopolium owner, Eutychus. You're also a patron of the arts, whether you realize it or not. The frescoes on your counter are more than just advertisements. They are windows into the culture, the humor, and even the superstitions of Pompeii. They hint at a deeper layer of daily life, a vibrant tapestry woven with the mundane and the mythical, and what archaeologists found painted on the walls of your establishment and others like it reveals much about how these people lived, loved, and even occasionally laughed at themselves. Take that Nereid on the seahorse, for instance. She's not just a decorative element, she's a nod to the sea, to trade, to the bounty of the Bay of Naples that sustained Pompeii. But she's also beautiful, perhaps even a bit playful, hinting at the Roman appreciation for beauty and sometimes a certain jovial sensuality. This was a culture that didn't shy away from depicting the human form or mythic figures. In their everyday spaces, it's a reminder that ancient life, despite its hardships, was infused with color, myth, and a certain robust enjoyment of existence. But the thermopolium of Reggio 5 held more specific and frankly more entertaining artistic treasures. Another fresco showed a dog, perhaps even your own Eutychus, on a leash. This isn't just a pet portrait, it's a detail that tells us about the animals people kept, the companionship they sought, and it's rendered with such charming realism. You can almost hear the dog's tail thumping against the pavement it grounds. The space in a relatable, almost modern way. Who among us hasn't doted on a beloved pet? Then there are the more subtle, but equally revealing details close by. Archaeologists found an inscription, a graffito scratched into plaster, that simply reads, Nisha Sinaid, now. For the modern ear, this might sound unremarkable, but Nisha was a Greek name common among freed slaves and workers, and Sinaid was a slang term often used derisively, implying a person who was effeminate or submissive, sometimes implying a passive partner in same-sex relations. This little scratch isn't just a scribble, it's a whisper from the past, a hint at the social dynamics, the name-calling, the casual observations that filled the air of Pompeii. It shows us that human nature, with its gossip and its judgments, hasn't changed all that much. It also subtly alludes to the diverse spectrum of relationships and identities that existed, even if often unspoken or derided, in ancient Rome. It reminds us that these were real people with real, sometimes complicated social lives. Imagine yourself, Eutychus, hearing such chatter, perhaps even seeing the inscription. You might shrug it off, or maybe it even sparked a knowing chuckle among your regulars. It's these tiny, seemingly insignificant details that allow us to step into their world, to feel the texture of their daily interactions. The Pompeians weren't just statues, they were breathing, gossiping, laughing, loving people, whose lives were often as messy and colorful as our own. The walls of your thermopolium, therefore, became a kind of ancient social media feed, capturing fleeting thoughts and interactions meant to be seen. By all, the overall impression from these new thermopolium discoveries is one of astonishing vibrancy and social complexity. It challenges the image of ancient Rome as a monolithic, stern society. Instead, we see a dynamic culture where different social strata mingled, where slang was prevalent, and where art was both functional and aesthetically pleasing. You, Eutychus, were not just selling food, you were selling a piece of Pompeian life, complete with its jokes, its characters, and its enduring human spirit. But as we peel back these layers, we're about to uncover something even more surprising, a truth that fundamentally shifts our understanding of this ancient city. Chapter 4. The unexpected colors of prosperity. For over 200 years, we believed that Pompeii froze on August 24. In the year 79, this date came from one source. It was a letter written by a man named Pliny. The younger Pliny wrote this letter about 25 years after the eruption happened. He was remembering what his uncle saw and did that terrible day. But here's the problem. Memory can trick us, and copying old text by hand can create mistakes. In October 2018, workers found something new at Reggio 5. They discovered writing on a wall. Someone had written it in charcoal. The writing said the 16th day before the kalends of November. That's October 17th in our calendar. This changed everything we thought we knew. The thermopolium had fresh autumn fruits inside. There were pomegranates. Workers also found the remains of a large storage jar. It had been sealed with plaster on October 17. But there's more. The people buried under the ash were wearing heavier clothes. These weren't light summer clothes. These were clothes for cooler weather. All these clues point to the same answer. Mount Vesuvius erupted in mid-October, not August. Why does this matter? Because it changes our whole understanding of what happened that day in August. Many rich families would have left Pompeii. They traveled to their country homes to escape the summer heat. The city would have been quieter. Fewer people would have been there. But in October was different. October was the busy season. The grape harvest was just finishing. The olive harvest was starting. Markets were full. The port was crowded with ships. Merchants were everywhere, doing business. October was when Pompeii was most alive, most full of people, most busy with daily life. This means the tragedy was even bigger than we thought. More people died than we believed. More lives were cut short. More stories ended without warning. Let's go back to our thermopolium. The painted rooster on the wall takes on new meaning now. In Roman culture, roosters symbolized victory and new beginnings. October marked the start of the Roman agricultural New Year. Farmers had just finished the grain harvest. They were starting to pick olives. They were making wine from fresh grapes. The thermopolium's menu shows this timing too. The fava beans found in the jars, those are a spring and early autumn crop in the Mediterranean. The snails preserved in the storage area. Romans considered them a delicacy. In autumn and winter, they believed snails were healthiest to eat after the first rains. Those rains usually came in October. Even the wine residue in the containers tells us something. Chemical tests show it was freshly fermented wine. This wine came from that year's harvest. It hadn't aged yet. All these details paint a picture. They show us a community at the peak of its busy season, a neighborhood humming with activity, a small business doing well and serving its customers. The woman and child whose remains we found, they probably weren't unusual visitors. They were likely regular customers. They might have stopped by for a warm meal on a cool autumn morning. They might have been running errands before a festival, or they might have just wanted to catch up on neighborhood gossip over food. This is what makes the Reggio 5 discoveries so powerful. They're not just about big historical facts. They're not just about when the eruption happened. They're about understanding the rhythm of daily life, the small moments, the ordinary routines that made up a person's world. And now we understand something else. These people didn't know what was coming. They had no warning. They were living normal lives in their busy season. Then everything ended in a single day. Chapter 5. The science beneath the street food. Modern archaeology isn't just about digging carefully with brushes anymore. Today's archaeologists bring scientists with them. They bring specialists in ancient DNA. They bring experts in chemical analysis. They bring people who study ancient plants and animals. All these experts help us learn things that earlier archaeologists never could have discovered at the Reggio 5. Thermopolium. This scientific approach revealed amazing details. First, let's talk about the food remains. Scientists didn't just identify what animals were eaten, they studied exactly which parts were used and how they were prepared. The duck bones showed knife marks in specific patterns. These marks meant the cooks were breaking down whole birds in a skilled way. They weren't just throwing random meat into pots. They were following techniques. They knew what they were doing. The fish bones came from several species. Scientists found remains of sea bream, mullet, and what might be tuna. Chemical tests on the pottery showed fish sauce residue. Fish sauce was called garum. In Latin, Romans put garum on almost everything, like we use ketchup today. But here's what's really interesting. The fish weren't all local. Some species came from different parts of the Mediterranean Sea. This tiny restaurant in one neighborhood was serving ingredients from hundreds of miles away. That tells us about trade networks. It tells us about supply chains. It shows us that even working-class people in Pompeii had access to food from distant places. The snail shells revealed something surprising too. These weren't just any snails grabbed from someone's garden. These were specific large snails that Romans raised. On purpose for food, they were farmed snails. The Romans had snail farms, just like we have chicken farms today. Think about what that means. Someone owned a snail farm somewhere near Pompeii. They raised snails specifically to sell to restaurants and homes. Those snails traveled to this thermopolium. The owner paid for them, then customers paid to eat them. That's a whole economy based on farmed snails. It shows how sophisticated Roman food culture really was. Now, let's talk about the plant remains. Scientists found more than just fava beans. They discovered traces of spelt, an ancient type of wheat, barley, lentils, and chickpeas. They found ground remains of various herbs and spices. One jar contained residue that tested positive for coriander and cumin. Another showed traces of what might be pepper. Black pepper in the 1st century came from India. It traveled thousands of miles along trade routes. It was expensive. Finding it in a working-class restaurant is significant. The botanists also studied the wood charcoal from the cooking fire. They identified oak, olive wood, and Mediterranean pine. Each wood burns at different temperatures. Each gives food different flavors. The owners were choosing their fuel carefully to control their cooking. All of this evidence points to something important. This wasn't just a place that heated up mystery meat in dirty pots. This was a real restaurant. It had skilled cooks, it had quality ingredients, it had regular customers who expected good food. Now, let's look at the human remains with fresh eyes. Scientists performed isotope analysis on the older man's teeth and bones. Isotopes are different forms of chemical elements. The isotopes in your bones reflect what you ate and drank throughout your life. They can even show where you lived at different ages. The man's isotope signature showed something unexpected. He probably wasn't born in Pompeii. He grew up somewhere else. His childhood diet was different from typical Campanian food. Then, sometime in his adult years, he moved to Pompeii. His later bone growth showed the local diet. This matches what we know about the Roman world. People moved around more than we usually think. They traveled for work. They moved to find opportunities. They migrated to cities looking for better lives. Maybe this man came to Pompeii as a young adult. Maybe he learned the restaurant business there. Maybe he saved money and bought or opened this thermopolium. Maybe he worked there until that October day, when everything ended. The younger man with the bone disease presents a different story. His skeletal lesions suggest tuberculosis or another chronic infection. In Roman times, such illnesses would have been debilitating. They would have made physical labor difficult. Yet he was there, in that thermopolium. Was he an employee despite his illness? Was he a family member? Was he a customer who had nowhere else to go? We can't know for certain, but his presence reminds us of something important. Ancient cities were full of sick people, disabled people, people struggling with chronic conditions. These people still lived, they still worked, they still participated in their communities, as best they could. The Regio 5 team also studied the building itself with new scientific methods. They used ground-penetrating radar to map structures beneath the volcanic material. Before digging, they used 3D laser scanning to record every surface in perfect detail. They took thousands of photographs from every angle to create digital models. All this technology helps preserve information that earlier excavations lost. When archaeologists in the 1800s dug up buildings, they often destroyed evidence. Without knowing it, they didn't have ways to study microscopic traces. They couldn't analyze ancient DNA. They couldn't test for chemical residues. Today, we can save all that information. We can study it now. We can study it again in the future with even better technology. The thermopolium isn't just a cool discovery. It's a complete scientific record of one moment in time. It's a snapshot of daily life preserved in ash and pumice. Chapter 6. Why it matters now. You might be wondering why we should care so much about an ancient fast food place. Why does one small restaurant from 2000 years ago matter today? The answer is simple but powerful. The Thermopolium showed us that regular people in the past weren't so different from us. When we think about ancient Rome, we usually picture certain things. We imagine emperors. In palaces, we see gladiators. In the Colosseum, we think about senators giving speeches. We picture soldiers marching in formation. Those things were real. They were part of Roman life, but they weren't most people's daily experience. Most people in Pompeii weren't emperors or gladiators. They were shopkeepers and craftspeople. They were merchants and workers. They were parents and children. They were people who got hungry at lunchtime and wanted something warm to eat. The Thermopolium shows us their world. It shows us that working people in ancient times faced the same basic challenges we do. They needed to eat well without spending too much money. They needed quick meals on busy days. They wanted food that tasted good and filled them up. The Thermopolium also reveals something about community in Roman cities. Not everyone had good kitchens in their homes. Many apartment buildings had no kitchens at all. Cooking fires were dangerous in crowded wooden buildings. Many landlords didn't allow them, so neighborhood restaurants weren't just convenient. They were necessary. They were where people gathered. They were where neighbors met and talked. They were community centers as much as food businesses. Think about your own life. Where do you go to meet friends? Maybe a coffee shop, restaurant, a cafe. Those places are important to you. They're part of your daily routine. They're where you feel connected to your community. The Thermopolium was the same thing for people in Pompeii. The graffiti on the walls proves this. Remember Nisha Sinae, that insult wasn't carved in stone, it was scratched quickly, probably by a customer. Maybe two people argued. Maybe someone got angry. Maybe it was meant as a joke between friends. Either way, it shows the Thermopolium was a living social space. It was a place where people interacted, where they had opinions about each other, where they expressed themselves, even in crude ways. The detailed frescoes tell us something else. The owner cared about how the place looked. They invested money in decoration. They wanted customers to enjoy being there. They wanted to create an atmosphere. That's the same reason restaurant owners today care about interior design. They want their space to feel welcoming. They want customers to return. Human nature hasn't changed much in 2000 years. There's another reason the Thermopolium matters. It reminds us that history isn't just about kings and wars and major events. History is also about ordinary life, about daily routines, about small businesses, about neighborhood relationships. For too long, archaeology focused mainly on temples, palaces, and tombs of important people. Those things are valuable to study. They teach us a lot, but they don't tell the whole story. Places like the Reggio 5 Thermopolium fill in the gaps. They show us how regular people actually lived, what they ate, how they spent their time, what mattered to them in their daily lives. This approach to archaeology is sometimes called the archaeology of everyday life. It's been growing more popular in recent decades. Archaeologists now recognize that understanding ordinary people is just as important as understanding elites. The woman and child who died at the Thermopolium weren't famous. No ancient writer mentioned them. They didn't own palaces or command armies, but their lives had value. They had routines and relationships. They had favorite foods and familiar places. They had neighbors who knew them. They had hopes for the future. Understanding their world helps us understand our own place in history. It helps us see the continuity of human experience across time. When you grab lunch at a food truck or pick up takeout from a local restaurant, you're participating in something. Ancient people have been doing this for thousands of years. Small businesses have been serving quick meals to busy customers since cities existed. The Thermopolium also reminds us how fragile life can be. The people of Pompeii didn't know October 17th would be their last normal day. They woke up that morning expecting an ordinary day. They made plans. They went about their business. Then everything changed in a few hours. That could happen to any of us. Natural disasters still occur. Unexpected events still disrupt lives. We never know which ordinary day might be our last ordinary day. Maybe that's the real lesson of Pompeii, not to live in fear, but to appreciate the present, to value the small moments, to recognize that everyday life, sharing a meal, talking with neighbors, going about your routine, is precious. The Thermopolium also teaches us about resilience. Pompeii was destroyed, The people died, but their story survived buried under ash for nearly 2,000 years. Their ordinary lunch counter waited now. We've found it, we've uncovered their story, we've learned their names, at least some of them we've studied. What they ate and how they lived in a way. There, not completely gone. Their daily life has been preserved and remembered. Their ordinary moments have become extraordinary, evidence of human experience. That's the power of archaeology. It gives voice to people who left no written records. It tells stories that would otherwise be lost forever. Every time you hear about a new discovery at Pompeii, remember that it's not just about ancient history. It's about human life. It's about people who loved, worked, worried, laughed, and lived, just like we do the Thermopolium in Reggio. 5 is a window into their world. It's a glimpse of daily life in a Roman city. It's evidence that people 2,000 years ago were fundamentally like us. They got hungry. They wanted good food at fair prices. They valued their communities. They cared about their spaces. They gossiped about their neighbors. They worked hard to make a living in the end. That's what makes archaeology so powerful. It connects us to our shared human past. It shows us that despite all the centuries between us, despite all the technological changes, despite different languages and customs, people have always been people. And that small Thermopolium, with its colorful frescoes and its storage jars and its tragic human remains, tells that story better than almost any other discovery. Closing thought. Every archaeological site has layers. The first layer is what we see, the stones, the bones, the objects. The second layer is what we can prove scientifically, the dates, the chemical compositions, the measurements. But the deepest layer is the human story, the lives lived, the choices made, the moments experienced. At the Thermopolium in Reggio. 5. All 3 layers come together. We see the physical structure, we understand the scientific evidence, and we glimpse the human story of a neighborhood restaurant. On an October day nearly 2,000 years ago, that's what makes archaeology worth doing. That's why we keep digging, keep studying, keep learning. Because every discovery like this reminds us, we're all part of one long human story, and that story deserves to be told.